Hi, I'm Jasmine Kelland. I'm from Plymouth University. It's great to be here. It's my first time in Scotland, so very excited to be here. Just before I get into the research, I want to tell you a little bit about me and kind of what kind of brought me here, if you like. At university, I'm a lecturer in HRM, and I manage the Masters in HRM programme. When I started working at the university, I started as associate lecturer. I didn't really plan on doing a PhD, to be honest. It was never something that really sort of thought, that's what I want to do with my life. When I got the role, they said it was a requirement of the role, so I started looking at PhD topics. And I started off quite half-hearted, really, looking at sort of HR topics, and nothing really sort of grabbed me, and I kept sort of struggling for about a 3-month period, really, thinking, what am I going to do this PhD on that I've got to do? And it was quite challenging. And then I started thinking about my life, and I thought about my actual personal life and what really amused me, irritated, aggravated me, and what I spent most of my time talking to my friends and my family about. And that was about the fact that I have 3 daughters, and both myself and my partner have worked full-time ever since we've had the girls. That's been our family setup, and we've faced quite a lot of challenges with that choice, and we've both faced challenges in equal measure, really. And that's something that I spend a lot of my free time talking about. And then once I started looking at the research, I absolutely loved finding out about it, and I could talk about it all day long now. So I've had quite a sort of full turnaround now, and if it was up to me, I'd be researching this kind of thing all the time. Particularly what kind of interests me and my family was this idea that it's always the mother as a primary caregiver, which has come up with Helen and Ben's discussions earlier. Why is it always the mother? Why is it always the mother that gets called? If the children are sick, if there's a non-pupil, anything like that, if they always will ring me, no matter how many times, I've said to them, you can ring either of us, we both work full time, we both have to sort of manage flexibility issues. But it's always me, consistently always me, and that's something that kind of is something that's really of interest to me. There's been some quite interesting things said to us as a family over the years. I've put a bleep here because I don't want to be kind of too rude on my first slide, but certainly this was said to my husband's manager. His manager, I said this to him. What the beep is your missus doing so much that you have to keep sloping off to get the girls. I think it's quite interesting that they're sort of interested in what I'm doing as in relation to whether he needs to go, and also that it's a kind of perception of sloping off. And when the manager said this, my husband kind of rang me up, laughing really, to say, you're going to absolutely love this quote, and I use it quite regularly, so sorry if anyone's heard me talk before, because I do use it quite regularly. And also, this is what happened a few weeks ago. Somebody in Chris's office said to me, you need to man up and tell Jazz to get her arse home, which I just think was really quite interesting, particularly with their sort of heading with Dad up today. I thought that was really quite interesting. So I had something really now I was quite passionate about, and so I started looking at the literature. And as Helen and Ben have talked about already, we can see that family life has changed. This kind of norm of breadwinner father has declined a lot, with lots of mums working full-time and being the breadwinner for their family. The stay-at-home dad rates are as high as they've ever been, and also there's a real sort of societal norm of actually fathers being involved, and that's been something that's quite approved of. So there's been huge changes, which is brilliant. But then what I don't understand, and I still, I'm a little bit closer to understanding, but still don't understand, is why sort of 11% of people, of fathers, do work part-time. There's still not that many fathers who work part-time. And then when you do a sort of student's classic of a Google search, there's just some images here to kind of illustrate this. If you search there, just Google search flexible working, and you get a lot of women in that image. I think there's one guy, maybe two. There's a lot of women in that image, which start to indicate that something's going on. In preparation for today, I was looking for the most recent data. So I Googled how many fathers work part-time. But sorry, that's a little bit scrappy, but you can see it defaulted to how many mothers work part-time, which I just thought was really interesting. Straight away, the default was, you've made a typo, you meant how many mothers. And I didn't mean how many mothers, but I was very glad when that came up and was quickly screenshotting it. So there's been research done in this area. Particularly in the USA, there's been quite a lot of research done in this area, saying that when fathers do want to be actively involved in childcare, that there are some challenges with that in the workplace. A lot of the research has been done in the US, and it's been done with students. So I was particularly interested in doing something in the UK, and actually sort of exploring this a little bit more with UK parents, with UK managers, and seeing if these sort of effects exist. Do fathers face negative consequences in the workplace? Particularly looking at those fathers who want to work part-time. I have looked at fathers and mothers, just because of the time today, I can't go into too much of the mothers, but suffice to say I had quite a lot of stuff about full-time mothers as well, but I'm just going to focus on the dads. But if you're interested in hearing more about full-time mothers, by all means grab me in the break and I'll happily tell you about some of the stuff I found about the full-time mothers. So what I did is I did an online survey. I got 82 managers that I could actually use the data for, and what I asked the managers to do online was to rate 4 little vignettes applications for a customer services role. So I asked those participants to rate them on a number of measures, just to sort of compare really what the difference was between mother and the father and the part-time and full-time conditions. I also did some focus groups in a number of different organisations to establish what some of the rationale behind those decision making was. So I gave them the same tasks, the same vignettes, but I asked them to discuss them and see what came out of that. And the last thing, the kind of most meaty thing that I did, was 32 interviews with parents, with fathers, with managers, to just kind of explore some of the issues that have come out, some of the things that come up in the literature, some of the sort of things that came out of the initial survey. I'll go through the survey results first, and you can see there, excuse the blue and pink. I hate to do that. I'm going to talk about gender stereotyping later, and I am aware of the irony of the blue and pink, but I just thought it'd make it really clear, and I've got quite a lot of data to show you, but I acknowledge the irony, okay? You can see that your part-time mother was scored higher than the part-time father in the online survey, and that was quite consistent. You can see when you look at the different measures of promotability, hireability, perceived competence and workplace commitment, that was true for all the measures. Your part-time father scored the lowest in against each of those measures. Also, when you look at overall, if you compare your part-time father, the overall scores part-time mother, and your full-time father and full-time mother, again, the part-time father is the lowest ranking of them all. When I got these results, I was very, very pleased. It's to say, you send your survey out when you're doing this sort of research, and you kind of hope that the thing that you thought would exist, exists, and so I was really kind of pleased when I saw these results. But I needed to find out a little bit more about it, so that's when I started to undertake the interviews, and actually I tried to get a little bit more of an understanding why this occurred, why this sort of phenomena occurred. And there's lots of themes that I identified when coding the data. I think I had about 48 different themes. And don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of those today. I'm sure you've got other things to do. But these are the strongest themes. And the reason why I've highlighted these as the strongest was because they came up the most frequently, but also sometimes they weren't the most frequent, but they were the most powerful and really kind of stuck to me because they were the things that were the most poignant, and the parents and managers seemed most upset and concerned about them. So this is why I kind of chose these three key themes. The first one being think child, think mum. And what that refers to is similar to the previous presentations, is that when people think of a child, they automatically will associate a mother and not necessarily associate the father, regardless of the working hours of both parents. You think about a child, you think about the mother automatically. Fathers get less support, and that came out quite frequently in the interviews, and also social mistreatment. I'll end with social mistreatment and give you some examples of the social mistreatment that I observed in the interviews. Okay, so for Think Child, Think Mum, whereas mum came up quite a lot, and the idea of sort of mum's day off really resonated with me from Ben's presentation. That was something that came up quite a lot in my interviews. Parents were saying that they were often asked the location of the mother as the sort of first thing whenever they would turn up at a play school, turn up at school, assuming that why are you here? Why isn't the mum here? What came up in quite a lot of the interviews was this idea that it was quite an innocent question. And the chap talked about this. He said, I suppose it was an innocent question, but I think there was more of a point to them. And some of these things are quite subtle, and a lot of things that I observed in the interviews, it was quite subtle. It was little comments here and there, but it builds a picture of something that creates quite a negative environment for people. Also that came up under this theme of sort of think child, think mum, was this notion of deviance. That of this particular father who I've quoted here was a stay-at-home dad, and he felt that he was quite deviant. And that came up a lot in the interviews, particularly with the part-time dads, particularly with the stay-at-home dads, that they did feel in society, if you like, that they were quite deviant. He talks there, generally the response is one of surprise. I feel like I'm encroaching on someone else's territory. On passport forms, the mother always comes first. It's just another one of those things. When I say I'm the main one at home, people will quickly move over the subject. It's such an unusual thing for people to understand. I see the kids, mums bringing the kids to school, and I feel like a fraud at times, and I felt it quite profoundly. That's really quite strong, that he felt a fraud. And I'm really quite interested in kind of where that sort of comes from, how much is that his own feelings or how much is that the way he's been treated. So we explored that, and I'll go on to explain a bit more about that. We talked about, the other thing that came quite a lot was this idea that fathers get less support in the workplace, and that was quite consistent throughout. That actually they're offered less support, that they get less flexibility, and that's something that lots of fathers and mothers were talking about. The quote that I've given here is from a manager, and then this particular manager was a HR manager, and she felt that a father would be looked at differently than a mum, and it's easier to think about a mum taking time off than a dad, and that they would be more supportive. This wasn't one isolated incident, this came up in practically every interview. People talked about that dad would get less support. One thing that we were just talking about before we started here today was that this is what people said to a researcher that's being recorded, in that they know is research about gender stereotyping. So I think what's quite interesting is these quotes came up in that circumstance. So you wonder what happens in the real world when they're not being recorded, when they know it's not going to be a part of research. This is what happened just in conversations with a researcher, and I just think that's something quite interesting, because it makes me personally feel that you won't necessarily the tip of the iceberg, really. One thing that came up with quite a few of the interviews with the managers is that caregiving fathers will have some support, but that it is subject to negotiation. And the idea of subject to negotiation came up from the fathers and also the managers, saying that the fathers felt they needed to negotiate that time off, but the managers almost expected them to. That sometimes for parents, for mothers who needed to go, they would just say, I need to go. My child's sick, I need to go, the school's called. Whereas for fathers, they're required to make a little bit more of a story about it. For example, one chap that I spoke to said that he was, school called and said that he needed to go and pick up the children, and the response straight away from his workplace, without fail, was always, why do you have to go? Why can't the mum go? Are you sure you definitely have to go? What's the situation? And only after he'd validated that the mother wasn't available, was ill, whatever that might be, then it'd be okay, you can go. Whereas his perception was if mother said, I need to go pick up a child, they could just go, and that was fine, there was no problem with that. The last sort of theme that I identified was this idea of social mistreatment, and this is something that's come up in some studies in America, and this is something that really sort of resonated with me, and I really thought was really quite interesting, and certainly I sort of recognised some of these things in my particular family. That fathers who are caregiving are viewed with suspicion, particularly those ones who want to work part-time. One of the managers there talked about that it would affect recruitment, and they think that even though they personally would have been okay on the recruitment panel, they think if they were interviewing somebody who wanted to work part-time and they were a father, that level of suspicion is going to affect whether they get that role or not. Which is really quite powerful, I think, and that's really quite significant. And that's, again, somebody telling a researcher that, not kind of doing it secretly, not actually changing the scores to get the right outcome. That's actually somebody saying to a researcher, this is what happens in my experience. Mockery came up quite a few times, and it came up in quite a sort of powerful sense, really. The quote that I've got here is from a HR manager, and HR director rather, with over 35 years' experience. And he felt quite strongly that caregiving fathers, particularly those who work part-time, would face a lot of workplace challenges. And according to him, he felt that this is the main type of discrimination that hasn't been tackled in organisations in the UK. In his experience, which is vast, he said that he thinks any fathers who want to work part-time would face a lot of challenges. In the quote here, he said there would be a lot of piss-taking. You're a bit of a wuss, she rolls a boost, wears the trousers, that sort of thing. Especially if it was due to childcare, there would be a lot of, you're not a real man, what's wrong with your wife? What he said in the last line, I think, is really quite interesting. It would be quite gentle, but would definitely occur. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think that's quite gentle. I think that's really quite harsh. And if I was wanting to work part-time and I was having those sort of things levied at me, that really might affect whether my decision to work part-time or continue to work part-time. Because that's a lot of things to say. And the fact that he said it right at the end, it's quite gentle, I thought that's more telling almost than what he said prior, because I wouldn't personally say that's gentle, but clearly very commonplace in his experience, of which there is a lot of years' experience. This came up particularly with the fathers again, that this sort of notion that caregiving fathers are idle. That if you are a caregiving father and you work part-time, then you are considered to be sort of quite lazy and that you're a little bit work-shy. The quote there is from a focus group, and in the focus group we were looking at the vignettes, but then they sort of went off and started talking about part-time fathers and stay-at-home dads more generally. The conversation got quite casual, but naturally the tape was still recording, and I was very interested to how the sort of conversation went on. And one working mother in particular, she works full-time, as does her partner. She says there's quite a few of them, part-time and stay-at-home dads at my kids' school. I know it works for some families, but every time I see them, I just think, go to work, you lazy bastard. It wouldn't work for my house. Again, that's really quite strong. It's strong to say in a focus group, it's strong to say in a focus group when you're surrounded by the managers, it's strong to say in a focus group with a researcher. So I do get the impression that it's the little bit of a tip of the iceberg, really, what we're looking at here. The quote below is from a stay-at-home dad, and someone said to him once, the thing is, you're just a bum. You look after your kids and do nothing else. I always think that I'm not capable of doing a day's work. So if you think about a full-time mum, would people have that same perception of them? Would they think of them as a bum if they're a full-time mum? And personally, I'm not sure that would happen, and I think it's a lot more prominent for fathers who stay at home, but I'd welcome the debate later on, I'd welcome discussion with you about that. There was also a theme of negative judgment, and negative judgment kind of thread throughout all of the research really, but I just thought I'd mention it separately here as well. There was a view of a part-time dad who said that he gave some concerns to the school. He said he felt quite concerned about the way the school was treating his children, and he wrote a formal letter of complaint. But he felt that that complaint was not taken seriously and would have been taken a lot more seriously if it came from a mum. He felt the impression he got from the school was very much a case of, there, little boy, you're a dad who looks after your children, you're not a proper person, you're not an upstanding citizen. So that is really quite strong. The father that I spoke to, he's a very measured individual. I was really quite, how can I explain it really? I was really quite interested and concerned that he felt so strongly that he felt that that's the way he'd been treated. He's got 4 children, and he's been sort of part-time dad for about 15 years, so has a lot of experience. And this wasn't an isolated incident. This was quite a long time ago, but still regularly happening. That happened, I think, about 5 years ago, and he said that was the worst example of it, but said that every day he would face similar challenges, which really stuck with me. And that night after the interview, I was still thinking about things, and that's really harsh that he felt that way. The last one I wanted to show you is just this idea of friendship and exclusion, which Ben sort of covered a little bit before. A lot of the dads who work part-time or who are actively involved talked about feeling quite excluded, and that I've classified as social mistreatment. They felt that there were friendship issues, and they felt that they weren't part of the sort of in-crowd, if you like, part of the in-group. The first quote there is by a full-time working mum who was married to a stay-at-home partner, and she felt that he had quite a difficult experience, and the children were young, and he talked about the fact that she didn't mix with many of the fathers. There was a big group of fathers that made really good friends with each other, and he's not one of them. He could have been, but they never invited him. So it's also that sort of notion that there's a lot of social support, but that you're not invited to that, you're not part of it. And lastly, another sort of father talked about, I felt excluded. It's difficult to pinpoint how much is my fault. I did withdraw a little. I felt self-conscious. I see women forming groups, but I don't get invited, and I've been very isolated. I've never felt legitimate to be part of it. And that sort of concept of legitimacy is really quite key, I think. Where has that come from? And what can we do almost to eradicate that if that's how our sort of fathers are feeling who want to be actively involved? There's lots more things I could go through, but I'm kind of conscious of the time and the sort of coffee will be soon. So I just want to kind of summarise really. I did find that there does seem to be what I've called a fatherhood forfeit. So for fathers who want to be actively involved, there does seem to be a bit of a forfeit in the quantitative data that you're less likely to get that role. You want to apply for a part-time job, you are less likely than a mother to get that role. And also more generally in the workplace, the forfeit takes lots of different goes in lots of different ways, but actually you can see that fathers do seem to be having some element of social mistreatment, there seems to be some negative judgment, and they're getting less support. Just to kind of conclude really, I just wanted to show you some things that have come up in the research and the interviews of people that I spoke to, is actually what can we do? What can we do in organisations? What can we do at home to try and make things better for parents in work, whether they're full-time mums, part-time dads, whatever that might be, what can we actually do? And some of the times, I think it's looking a little bit more generally, what are these stereotypes and where do they come from? Is it that they come from children who are very young? Are we actually perpetuating these with our own children, the toys that we buy the children, things that we do? Are we actually perpetuating the stereotypes with our own children? Is there anything that we can do that's different? Whether it is if we're buying the sort of toys, these sort of caregiving sort of toys, you see the girl there with a Hoover. I'm not sure there's anything more depressing than that particular slide. But actually, where's it coming from and what can we do about that? Also, the language that we use, often in a lot of the interviews people were talking about, they didn't mean anything by it. It was meant as a joke. I'm sure there was no offence caused. However, in some cases, years on, people are still recounting these stories to me. So actually, maybe it was deeper than they thought. So thinking about the language that we all use, actually, are we being fair in the comments that we make? That might just be innocent questions. We might just have been making conversation. But actually, what is the language that we're using? Role modelling, which you mentioned before in organisations, if you have great role models, shout about them, promote them, discuss it, so that you can actually increase that dialogue in the workplace and make fathers who want to work part-time not deviant and not feel that they're going against the norm in any way. And lastly, my HR background's coming out now, but look at our policies. Is there anything that we can do in our policies to change them, to make them more inclusive, to make them more gender neutral? Lots of organisations have done a lot of work in this area, so it's building on existing great work, but checking the policies to make sure that we've covered all of these things and they're fully inclusive can be something that can really help us in organisations. We've got questions at the end, so I won't take questions now, but by all means keep in contact with me. I'd love to hear your stories. If you're thinking some of the things I've said today and thought that's happened to me, I've really experienced that, by all means email and chat to the break. It'd be great to talk to you more. As I think we've all kind of said, we're always looking for participants. It's very hard to get hold of dads, particularly dads who are actively involved and working part-time. So if that's you, if you know somebody that might want to be interviewed, please just let me know. It'd be great to talk to you. Lots of references there, should you want to read them. Probably not today. Thank you very much.